Have you noticed that the way books are described has changed in the last 10 or so years? People loved arguing genres in the past, and that still happens, but these days we also get lists of tags with our stories. These function almost like a mini blurb or even synopsis. While some remain mostly confined to websites like Archive of Our Own, a few have broken containment. You now get brick-and-mortar bookstores saying things like enemies to lovers, and plenty of tropes or descriptors are beginning to be treated like genres. That is, I believe, a result of the growing quantities of works combined with people's limited time. As new platforms have emerged, tutorials get created, passion gets spread, and all around the barriers to entry are lowered, we find ourselves blessed with more and more content. Web serials, self-published novels, fanfiction, and all manner of unique writing projects. And as welcome as they are, that quantity has an impact, both for readers and writers. The two places I have personally seen this impact is in the aforementioned growing use of tags and in how people treat reviews. Looking at reviews first, it's no secret to anyone that numbered scores have been, I don't want to say useless, but difficult to rely on for a long time. In theory, a 3 out of 5 or 5 out of 10 should be the middle point, an average work. A higher score is for works that stand out and a lower one for those that fall short. In reality, most places consider anything less than a 7 out of 10 to not be worth their time. And there are other reasons for this. People have discussed factors like fans getting upset about their favorite works being rated lower, or how lower rated works might not even get reviewed because they're not worth looking at in the first place. So any rating will start at a baseline of 5 for being good enough that the reviewer heard about the work. An aspect that plays into these ideas is, as I said, the lowered barrier to entry and growing number of works. Not in the sense that a lowered barrier means more bad works, but just that it means more stuff in general, and that includes very high quality stuff. What that means from a reader's perspective is that past a certain point, they don't need to bother with less than an 8 or 9 out of 10. There's so much out there that they can afford to be picky and only bother with the best of the best. If something doesn't get a high score, why check it out over something that does? For authors, that can make things pretty difficult. A less than perfect score can drag someone out of the limelight and they'll quickly get swept away by the constant flow of new content. In theory, part of this can be alleviated by a growing audience. Things are not only easier to create, they're also more accessible than ever. And not everyone enjoys quite the same things. A 10 out of 10 for one person won't be for someone else, so they'll look at other works. And that is where things can start to get difficult for both the reader and the author. With so much stuff out there, as you go down the ratings, it gets harder and harder for anything to stand out enough for a reader to find it. And lower review scores do still get given out for lower quality, so readers sifting through the pile will struggle to find anything worth their time. Which leads directly into why tags have gotten more and more specific and descriptive. An author writing a fantasy realizes that their work is never going to top the fantasy chart, but they also realize that their urban fantasy novel will do a little better on that list since it's narrower in scope and therefore has less competition. For a reader, it's also more descriptive. The fantasy fan that wants a high fantasy epic romance is not interested in the urban fantasy murder mystery, so it's only sensible to separate them out into different lists. That's not a new idea, we've been doing that for ages. Really, the increase in highly specific tags is a natural evolution. The old sorting system wasn't built to handle this amount of readers and stories, so it had to be expanded. Now you're able to look for the exact flavor of soft sci-fi, robot protagonist, space exploration, alien diplomacy novel you were looking for, and the author who wrote it doesn't have to compete with over a century of sci-fi classics to even enter the discussion. For reviewers, news sites and aggregators certainly aren't complaining either about being able to make even more tier list videos for each specific subgenre and combination. And there's also the, in my opinion, slightly less important benefit of being able to filter out books that might take a direction you don't like. Obviously, if you're not interested in a romance, then you shouldn't read one, but some people can get a little overzealous in avoiding anything that even tangentially includes anything other than the specific tropes they're looking for, which leads us cleanly into the issues with this development. Because of course there are issues, nothing is perfect. And one of the immediate ones is that a tag doesn't do a huge amount to explain how exactly the trope plays out in the story. Romance used to mean that a major focus of a book is one or more romantic relationships and how they play out. Because it's a genre, now that it's morphing into a description, it could mean that there is a romantic subplot or even just that some of the main cast happen to be in a relationship, which will affect some of the choices they make. For a potential reader who's just browsing, it's impossible to tell without getting a more in-depth review. A mild attempt to rectify that has been made in some places by getting even narrower with the tags. Find quick ways to describe the relationship and how it progresses, or exclude those tags so their absence indicates that the romance is not the focus. But unfortunately, what that achieves is exacerbating another problem that tags over genres has. At some point, you're spoiling the whole story. If your noir detective story comes tagged rivals to enemies, and you introduce our detective main character and the police officer they're always competing with to solve crimes, I'm not going to be surprised when in the third act the officer turns out to be a crooked cop. You told me what was coming from the get-go. It's easier for some genres, but in others it's almost a paradox. If you hate certain twists but someone else loves them, then for you the tag is a useful warning. For them, it's a climax-ruining spoiler. Frankly, not something I have an answer for. Spoiler-free reviews from sources you know suit your tastes can help, but part of our problem to begin with was that neither readers nor reviewers can keep up with every new release. It's simply not possible to review every book or read every review. You have to narrow down the list. And there's a few more problems still to go. In a highly competitive market, authors will look for any edge they can. One way to do that is to be strategic about how you label your work. Trying to appeal to the market is, again, nothing new. At the peak of YA, lots of novels were advertised as being part of the genre. Young adult doesn't really mean much, so you could get away with a lot under that umbrella. If you can point to certain parts of your book or be a little generous with what a tag means, then you can add it to your book and hopefully trend higher in that community than where you actually should be. I should clarify for anyone who doesn't often go looking for books in this way, what I'm talking about here is that generally websites will have ratings for books overall as an indicator of quality. Then you can go into a specific genre or tag and see the highest rated works which have those tags. A long-standing genre like sci-fi will have the top spots taken by pretty much unassailable works. You might do well on the sci-fi list, but when someone wants recommendations for the best of the best, they won't see you. If, however, you're also tagged biopunk, there won't be so many classics and you have a shot. Which is what we wanted, that's literally the point, is the system working as intended, but only if we're all being genuine when tagging. It also doesn't help that this can happen unintentionally. If your favorite tag is one of the popular new descriptive ones, then you're going to struggle a little in lists that haven't been curated by someone. Because something like enemies to lovers, which I mentioned at the very start of the video, just describes part of a plot. When you filter with that tag, you're going to get the highest rated stories that feature enemies resolving their differences and getting together, not the books that do it the best. Even with reviews and recommendations, it's difficult. Ask for the best of hard sci-fi and people will tell you about the books they felt did the best job of really sticking to scientific fact and saturating their narrative with it. But if you ask for works featuring secret identities, you'll just get everyone's favorite superhero stories. Maybe a couple of Batman or Spider-Man stories where grappling between the man and the mask is a big theme, but not the best of the best stories using secret identities as a central focus from across all literature, because that's simply not a thing most people are thinking about or trying to compile. Genres come with a slew of often debated, but usually understood conventions. Going into cyberpunk is like going to an Italian restaurant. The exact dishes will be different, but you have an idea of what to expect. Descriptive tags are an ingredient list, but don't tell you what's being cooked with them. So what is the takeaway from all this? Honestly, there isn't one. It's just one of those things that I think is interesting and good to know about. Knowing what you're looking for and how to find it is a useful skill, and the methods are ever changing. In this case, it's a problem of organization and communication. Neither of those are easy to solve. The issue is probably worse from the author's side, since a reader doesn't have to find the new releases. They can just read the classics and whatever gets lucky enough to make the most popular lists. What do you think of the growing use of tags, or the upward trend in what is considered a good review score? Tell me in the comments what your favorite tag is. Personally, I spent a lot of time on AO3 trying to find good soulmate AUs.